Okay. 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 Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. Welcome everyone to today's webinar. Okay, this is actually a collaborative project with Unhas. Welcome our counterparts from Unhas. It would be great if we would physically meet. Okay, we don't know each other physically. We only know each other virtually. But I'm really grateful for today's session. And I welcome everyone to share this the link to everyone of your friends or anyone that you actually think that they might be interested in today's topic. I think today's topic is very interesting, and we have very reputable speakers, and we have and we have from every sector that I believe that can cover so many things in today's topic. And so our topic is migrant workers in COVID-19. We know how this topic is hotly debated everywhere, and not only in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and even ASEAN, it's around the world. Everyone is impacted by this. So I believe that today's webinar would be very impactful from the very reputable speakers. I hope that we can share a little bit and from the just a little bit introduction on the speakers. Just a brief one. I think they are actually well known already, but throughout your session also you can actually introduce yourself. The first speaker, we actually have Puan Haryanti from Ministry of Human Resource Malaysia. Welcome, Puan Haryanti. Puan Haryanti will actually start the session. Welcome, Puan. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation today. And then the second one will be Mr. Alex Ong. I always like to talk to Mr. Alex Ong. He has so many things to say when it comes to migrants. He's from Migrant Care. Okay, so he will be dealing with the perspective from NGOs. And then the third one is I actually owe an apology because I don't really have the time to talk to her personally, but I am very happy to meet her today, Prof. Dr. Marwati Riza from Unhas. Thank you very much for having us today, together with us today, and I hope to have an impactful insight from you from the Indonesian perspective. And last but not least, I think this the well-known Dr. Salawati, Dr. Salawati Mat Basir is from UKM. Okay, she has been dealing with migrant issues for such a long time. Thank you, Doctor, for accepting my invitation today. And I hope everyone can benefit from your sharing. All right. So she will be actually dealing with the ASEAN counterparts, lah. All right. And then just a brief briefing a little bit on the session, how the session will go. Okay, the first session will be conducted by all the four speakers. Okay, the four speakers will be given around 15 to 20 minutes to actually present on your part. Okay, I will actually share your slides if you have any. If you don't, you can just proceed with your presentation. Right, and then after all the four speakers actually had completed, we will have a little bit of interaction session. So anyone who has any questions can actually proceed with your questions, whether you want it to ask it vocally, or you can actually type it in the chat box. Inshallah, I will actually read it. Okay, without further ado, I will actually invite now Puan Haryanti from Ministry of Human Resource to start her presentation. I will share your slide. Yeah, Puan. Wait.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nadia. Hi, everyone. Distinguished panelists from university in Indonesia, if I'm not mistaken, from UKM, as well as Mr. Alex. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. Dr. Nadia, can you please kindly share?
Hold on, I'm sharing. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay. Normally kan people will share kan, so alright. Hold on, just a little bit. I dah buka tadi. 120. Alright. Okay, can you see the slide?
Not yet.
Okay, hold on. How about now?
Yeah, I can. Just make it a slideshow.
Make it
Yes.
all right. Yes,
Okay.
you can just
Thank you so much.
see next if you want to move to the next slide. Right, I hope everyone can mute their mic for to give way for Puan Haryanti to present. Thank you, Puan. You can go. The floor is yours.
Okay. Okay, so first and foremost, again, thank you to Dr. Nadia and UKM for the opportunity. And I hope each of us can actually learn from one another and contribute to further enrich our discussion today. I am Haryanti from the Ministry of Human Resources Malaysia, and I will be sharing on the issue of migrant workers during COVID-19 and touch a little bit on the government's efforts and initiatives in addressing those issues. Next slide, please, Doctor. Okay, so first of all, allow me to provide some context for my talk by way of sharing some background information on labor migration in Malaysia. So at a glance, year 2020 has proven to be difficult globally, and Malaysia is not exempted from the adverse impact of COVID-19 pandemic in the economic aspect. Now, the various movement control order phases that were implemented since 18 March 2020 has heavily influenced the performance of economic activities following the domestic supply and demand factors and the influence of external sectors. Now, all of this has led the Malaysian economy to record negative growth for 3 consecutive quarters for year 2020. Now, the GDP performance for 2020 declined 5.6% as compared to a positive growth of 4.3% in 2019, which are actually influenced by the fall of all economic sectors, as you can see on the display. But one thing that I would like to highlight in terms of labor productivity, in the fourth quarter of 2020, the manufacturing sector registered a growth of 6%. Now, all of these sectors that is in the slide are sectors that are highly reliant on foreign laborers from various countries of origin. So as such, when we look at it, when we analyze this, the migrant workers, they are the ones that were directly affected by the pandemic COVID-19. By end of 2020, the number of foreign workers in Malaysia stands at 1.4 million, a contraction of 20% of the previous year at 1.9 million foreign workers. Now, this downward trend is due to restrictions of international inbound and outbound travels from both the receiving and sending countries. As at 31st March 2021, the number of foreign workers is at 1.2 million due to the moratorium imposed since June 2020, which will likely remain stagnant until at least middle of this year. Next slide, please, Doctor. Now, allow me to also share a little bit on migration in ASEAN. According to the International Labour Organization, the ILO, as at 2020, there are 10 million international migrants in ASEAN, and in the countries of destination, the breakdown is as displayed in your screen. Now, we can see that in Singapore and Malaysia, although the number of migrant workers are actually relatively low compared to the total workforce and country's population, the COVID-19 positive cases are highly disproportionate. This goes to show that during the pandemic, migrant workers in ASEAN are one of the most vulnerable group. Next slide, please, Doctor. Okay. So as we all know, COVID-19 has affected all workers, primarily in terms of job losses, which in turn contributed to loss of livelihood. Although some informal sectors like the gig economy, all of them has gained a positive trajectory, but in labor-intensive sectors, which is predominantly occupied by foreign workers, companies and businesses are suffering financially, which resulted in loss of employments to the workers. There were a number of studies on the impact of COVID-19 to migrant workers done by various bodies and academic institutions, such as the UN through ILO and IOM, as well as local universities and others. What I am sharing here is the summary of issues highlighted by those studies. Next slide, please. So the first one is on discrimination. This was highlighted in various reports on the instances of xenophobic attacks, mostly on social medias. Now, why is this issue important? Because this may drive migrants not to seek testing or medical treatment and hide from authorities out of fear, which creates further risk for the general public. There are also other forms of discrimination, which I will touch on specific following issues. So next is on access to healthcare. So as we all know, undocumented migrant workers are in breach of immigration law of the country. Hence, they are subject to arrest in detention centers, which later become source of COVID-19 clusters. Now, from the government, we do not deny that the pandemic may have resulted in migrant workers to be undocumented due to myriad of reasons, well, primarily with regard to their employers, and this in turn resulted in the lack of access to proper healthcare. Further, it has also been highlighted that foreign workers, they have no proper PPE, personal protective equipment, at their workplace. And this is again an issue of safety and health at workplace, which actually brings me to my next point on the issue of housing and accommodation for migrant workers. Now, as we all know, adequate housing is one of the requirements for employers to fulfill when employing foreign workers. But some housing conditions are in dire state with no room for proper physical distancing. Okay, so now I'm gonna touch on the issue of employment and social protection. Now, migrant workers, due to their vulnerability, are often the first to lose their job, which affects their migration status, and in some cases are not being paid the wages they are due. Now, this inequality of treatment greatly affects their livelihood, as they lack the income support and other forms of safety net, which is actually a segue for my next point on the issue of vulnerability to forced labor. Now, all of the issues that I have explained and mentioned before, they certainly increase migrant workers' vulnerability amidst the pandemic. And I am sure all of us here are aware of the forced labor issue, to which our rubber manufacturing and palm oil sector was hit quite hard at the international fora with sanctions to some of Malaysia's products. To make it worse, the travel restriction imposed by the government to curb the spread of the pandemic have forced migrants to actually remain in Malaysia, in this country. Now, with many of them already in debt bondage and owe high recruitment fees, but they are unable to leave, which all in all are actually indicators of forced labor. Now, before the pandemic, migrant workers are already susceptible to forced labor, but the pandemic and the response toward the pandemic has somehow made the situation worse. My final point regarding the issue is on the repatriation. As like I've said earlier, the inability to return to their home countries, to which multiple studies have shown that although there are a large scale of return of migrants, but many of them are still in destination countries. This goes through for Malaysia too, as the labor demand still remains the same. Okay, next slide, please. Now, I hope with all of the issues that I have briefly explained, I still have your attention because I try to touch on the issue a little bit more briefly to give more focus on the efforts of the government. I would like to put on record, I would like to highlight that all these initiatives are being made with the issues that I have explained earlier in mind, as the government strive to do our best to respond to the degree of disruption. But we also need to ensure sustained economic growth and at the same time remain vigilant to the safety and health risk. So for clarity and ease of discussion, the categories of government's initiative are categorized into legislation, policies, programs, and others. So as for legislation, at the domestic level, one of what probably is our biggest achievement was the enforcement of the Workers' Minimum Standard of Housing and Amenities Act, or Act 446, which actually couldn't have come at a better time. The Act came into effect on 1st of June 2020, aimed at improving minimum standards for housing, which previously only applied to mining and plantations, and is now extended to all sectors of employment, including services, constructions, and manufacturing. Now, the amendment of the Act is made to ensure that the accommodation provided by the employer or centralized accommodation provider is in accordance with the international standards. It sets out the responsibility of employer and accommodation provider for ensuring the safety and welfare of workers staying in the accommodation. Additionally, the amendment is also in line with the health requirement, especially on the aspect of physical distancing. At a regional level, in which Malaysia through MOHR, the Ministry of Human Resources, during our chairmanship for the Asean Labour Ministers meeting, we have adopted a joint statement, which is actually, I think, among the first in the region to produce a joint statement on the response to the impact of COVID-19 on labour and employment. The joint statement draws a reference and pays a particular emphasis on the migrant workers and recalled its commitment to the ASEAN consensus on the protection and promotion on the rights of migrant workers. Now, as for policies, in which I would like to highlight that as for the government, we do acknowledge the frustration that stems from the lack of policy coherence as well as policy inconsistencies. But allow me to also put on record that no nation in this world has managed to escape the widespread disruption from COVID-19. And while the government is striving to improve on our service delivery and maintaining the economic, the social support for the people, the policies that we have developed and will develop, they need to be flexible and dynamic to address the rapid change and better respond to the outcome of the said changes. Now, specifically for migrant workers, the government has made compulsory for COVID-19 screening to foreign workers as a long-term measure. Now, as for short-term to medium-term measure, the government has imposed a moratorium for hiring of new foreign workers, which will be in place until June this year, and enforce travel restrictions for all foreigners, but again, subject to conditions. Now, these policies are further supplemented by programs, particularly the recalibration plan, which is jointly implemented by the Ministry of Home Affairs and MOHR, beginning from November last year until middle of this year for migrant workers already in Malaysia. Now, this recalibration plan consists of two main components: the return recalibration program and the labor recalibration program. Now, the return program allows foreign workers to return back to their home country subject to conditions, while the labor program regularizes workers to be employed, again, subject to conditions set by the Immigration Department, and is now open for 4 sectors, which is construction, manufacturing, plantations, and agriculture. Now, further from the Ministry of Human Resources, we have also engaged in various dialogues at domestic level, regional, as well as international. As early as May 2020, an online webinar on the COVID-19 impact on Malaysian supply chain was held with participation from government, employers, and workers. And this was further supplemented with we actually had an inaugural United Nations Malaysia Policy Dialogue and on the protection of migrant workers during COVID-19. Now, this particular policy dialogue has provided a multilateral platform to discuss on improving the protection of migrant workers in Malaysia. At a regional level, an online forum was held between ASEAN member states on the impact of COVID-19 on the rights of migrant workers in ASEAN, which allows us to learn from one another of the good practices and improve coordination between ASEAN member states. Other efforts and initiatives are by way of strengthening the existing cooperation with sending countries through their diplomatic missions in Malaysia. And since the first MCO was imposed in the country, the ministry, MOHR, has also operated our operation center. And to date, I think we have responded to more than 50,000 calls and emails. And one of the prevalent issue that was highlighted in the calls and emails are actually regarding payment of wages. Now, in terms of how we actually handle this ops room. We don't really make segregation regarding their status, whether they are local workers or whether they are foreign workers, and even whether they are undocumented or documented foreign workers. Now, this is done to ensure impartial assessment and investigations on the complaints that we receive through the ops room. And permit me to also share that coming next week, the Ministry of Human Resources will be launching a new form of grievance mechanism specifically targeted at vulnerable workers, which this new form, we utilize technology to address the issue of access to remedy by both foreign and local workers. Now, to conclude, I mean, as the government, we do acknowledge that all of these initiatives, all of these efforts, especially when it comes to labor migration governance, I mean, they are definitely not without shortcomings, which is why we welcome platforms such as this to share and most importantly to learn from each and every one of you and improve on our existing mechanism. So that is all from me. I thank you again for the opportunity, and back to you, Dr. Nadia. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Poyanti. Always love to hear insights from you. We actually have the opportunity to learn, but because before this, maybe we don't know what MOHR had done. Okay, maybe perhaps it was not being shared publicly. What have you done? Perhaps people would actually love to judge, saying that, oh, ministry is not doing anything, and then, that's why I invite you to actually share with all here. There are part of my students of migration class are also here, so I think these insights are very, very important for them to get to get to know what the ministry had been done. Okay, perhaps before this, people thought that all this COVID-19 is not giving any benefit, nothing, no benefit at all is being given to the migrant workers, especially putting aside whether they are irregular or irregular. But I think the what Poyanti actually had said and presented, we know that there are initiatives, and of course there are hurdles that cannot be overcome just like that. Perhaps we need time and all. Okay, thank you very much, Puan Yanti. I hope you are still going. We will stay until the second session for people to actually ask. I think perhaps most of the people will actually ask questions because you're from the government side. Okay, hot debated issue ni memang from government side. Normally people will ask lah. Alright, thank you, Puan Yanti. I will stop sharing. Okay, I will move to our next speaker, which is Mr. Alex. Mr. Alex is from the Migrant Care. And then, okay, I will actually start sharing. Hold on, Mr. Alex. I will start sharing your. Sorry. Okay, all right, hold on. Okay. Okay, it's not here. It's not. It was here before. I actually miss out. Where is it? Always like this. Hold on, I'm so sorry about this.
It's okay.
If it's not here, I have to download again your slides. Hold on. I'll just stop sharing, and I'll because the slide is already here. Right. Okay. People are still coming in, so I have to admit in the same time all the administration, all the administration work also I have to do. Okay. Hold on. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes,
Mr. Alex, slides, is it there?
yes.
All right, okay, Mr. Alex. Okay, you can start, Mr. Alex.
Okay, very good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to this very important forum that we can actually openly discuss about the situation of the migrant worker in Malaysia during the COVID environment here. So to begin with, I have to thank Puan Haryanti for her frankness in telling us what has been done by the government. Of course, we have many what we call. I have to agree to disagree with her on many matters that he mentioned, because from the what we call grassroots social worker is concerned, we are looking more into the what we call the micro perspective rather than the macro perspective. Even for the policy that has been decided, it is also subject to what we call to the application to narrow down the gaps that we may be facing on the ground. It is not just for the policy, for the sake of making policy. Policy must be something which at least serve the purpose and solve the problem on the ground. So as a whole, can I have the first page? Yes. So basically, it's actually if we look into the Indonesia's migrations issue, for the demographer and the what we call the social scientists, actually it can be easily simplified with only one term about the trend of migration. Indonesian migration is actually, it can be first best described as feminization and informalization and beyond ASEAN region. So the reason I mentioned about the feminization, so many people thought that when we meet with the migrant, they are all men. In actual fact, 70% of the Indonesian migrant are all female, and a majority of them are actually working in the informal sector. We also face a situation of the former worker who has been working in the informalized economic system, meaning that they are actually working outside the taxation system. I think this is actually quite a big topic, but deserve to be heard. So as far as the impact of the dynamic of the COVID-19, I believe Puan Haryanti has already mentioned a lot. And we are actually very concerned about many policy which happen, especially on the issue of the domestic migrant worker, where actually Indonesia, out of the almost 100,000 domestic worker, close to 80% are actually Indonesian here. And when in 22nd January 2020, when the JTK, or the Manpower Department of Malaysia, Indonesia NAKER, has actually has actually cancelled the protocol MOU protocol 2011, which actually removed the responsibility of the agent who bring this domestic worker to Malaysia, put it into the accountability of the Malaysian judiciary system. They have any problem, they go to court. So actually that actually has created a lot of actually gaps there and created a lot of problem, and also what we call accelerate the exploitation process. And that also apply to the made online policy, which was introduced by the Malaysian government back in 2018, where a lot of migrant, they actually come in as a tourist and then try to get the work permit. For those who get it, they may face the situation as another domestic worker. Those who didn't get, they are actually put into the position of become irregular migrant, unprotected, and very vulnerable. So as far as this, what we call since 2018, we see a great momentum of this female migrant enter Malaysia, whether it's via Nunukan or via Antikong in Sarawak, or from Batam, from Tanjung Pinang, and then from this Tanjung Balai. All these are actually a major important entrance for the irregular migrant. So next please. So basically, as far as the theme of this particular forum is actually to deal with the policy uncertainty, role of NGO, issue of legal protection and concern of the receiving country. So I may be a little bit long, but I'll try to cover as much as possible. Next. So so what happened was actually why I mentioned about Protocol 2011. It was because in December 2016, due to the certain disagreement between the government, so the MOU expired and not extended. However, in the international relation, no matter it already expired, the spirit of collaboration and cooperation is still there. We cannot use the basis of this particular MOU, which is already expired, this no further discussion, then we can ignore the responsibility of the sending country and the receiving country. So the basis of actually the basis of actually cancellation of Aku Janji and Protocol 2011 has actually put the vulnerable domestic worker even in the worst position, because just imagine, yeah, a rural woman who came to Malaysia, cross border, come to work, didn't get their salary, they need help. So in the past, they can always seek the help from the agent as a first frontliner to solve the problem. But when this particular cancellation of Aku Janji, which actually outlined the situation of actually the intermediate role of the agent, who actually been granted the monopoly for the domestic worker placement, suddenly their function already disappear. They have no more accountability and responsible for this domestic worker. And then on the other hand, there are also a lot of issue here. Is actually, for example, payment of salary on before 7 days of each week, of each month, and then a day rest and so on and so forth, and also payment of the salary through the bank account. And this actually has put the domestic worker into a very vulnerable situation, because their salary is all paid to the agent. They don't receive any money. And then that will actually put them into the bondage situation, especially when their passport been withheld. They want to cry for help. They do not know where to go. The only venue that JTK opened to them is actually only in the process of the court. How can a village girl or lady can go to the Malaysian court? They have no money. They have no social networking to the legal environment. So I believe that this particular decision, even though it was declared between the what we call the embassy and the JTK, which I think is irrelevant at all, because when the MOU is signed between the minister, it should be the both minister who actually declare that we announce this particular protocol, not at the Director General's level. So as far as this part is concerned, that's why I say that the cancellation of Protocol 2011 is actually pronouncing that sentence to the private domestic agency, because they have no more role to play. So why should we need the agency system here? So in fact, with this particular declaration itself, is also to be very frank, is also disqualified JTK from the further negotiation on the MOU table, because normally we do understand that authority given to them to sign the paper, they must come with the accountability and responsibility. We cannot just simply deny the fact that because domestic worker here, they are considered as helper, not recognized by the Malaysians Employment Act. But beyond that, we have to remember that we have the international instrument of the good spirit between two countries that we have to abide to, not just to look looking into the domestic law itself. So the other part is actually immigration law enforcement during the COVID, because during the food distribution, we actually meet up with a lot of these migrant workers, and majority of them are actually marginalized because of their irregular status. They cannot get help from anybody, including the Indonesian embassy, because they do not have the proper document, and it is wrong in the diplomatic protocol for the embassy to reach out to this irregular. That's why we become the bridge in between to solve this particular problem through the resources. So just now, when I mentioned about the denial of justice, a lot of situations when these migrants, they are actually complaining about their grief. they are supposed to go to JTK office, but in the situation of COVID, they are immobile. They cannot go to JTK office. And then they also like being confined and trapped in the work environment in the house. How can they go to JDK? So this particular situation has actually created a very challenging situation for them who actually fell in a trap. They need money, they cannot get money. They want to go out, they cannot go out. And this is actually very challenging on the policy gap. And then we also have the situation as what Haryanti, this point Haryanti was mentioning about the detention center. So as we know that in the detention center, we do have what we call capacity of about this what we call 30,000, but we have actually more than 50,000 people there. So what happened to those over detained? They have served their penalty, yet they are actually like still contained in the detention center. There must be something done between the government of these people who are already wrong. They've been penalized. They deserve their freedom to be repatriated home. And then one of the significant what we call trend right now is actually the transform of banned outsourcing cleaning services, where actually a lot of what we call it is very difficult to recruit domestic worker from Indonesia this day because their education level has already increased. So they want to work in the factory. They want to work in something which is actually formal. But there are so many outsourcing cleaning company recruited them, and then the approval to them is actually do not have a very clear cut where are they working, who are their employer. So in this particular situation, the cleaning service, which has the strong connection to get the approval quota, they will actually also acting as the outsourcing company that actually sell what we call cleaner who come in to do as a cleaner. They are not working in the shopping mall. They are not working in the office building. They are also not working in the condominium, but they have been at least sell out as a domestic worker for the immediate profit by these cleaning services. And then at this moment, a lot of this what the salary is all paid to these cleaning services, and many cleaning services suddenly closed door, and their salary being paid to them is actually vanished in the air. And these migrant workers got stuck there. They cannot do anything, and then to complain to GTK become a very big hurdle. They cannot climb that hill to reach out to the Putrajaya nor the Subang Jaya JDK office. Next. So so this is actually a lot of situation when we talk about the policy. We cannot just simply do cut and paste from the European what we call format, because we have a different situation. And then of course I trusted that GTK has done a lot, but sometimes it's actually they may overlook the obsolete situation which actually need to be localized and regionalized. And then we can see that actually the globalized labor market is actually moving towards the semi-skilled uh, uh, and what we call the low skill and semi-skill now become the target. Previously, it's all low skill, low education level. So we also actually at this moment we also question about the legislature and the executive order given out by our bureaucrat. Legislature wise is actually, for example, for the law, we do not have any domestic worker law there, and our what we call our this what we call our workers what we call Akta Pekerja or Employment Act doesn't cover this informal worker, yeah, including local. And then certain executive order is just given at the mercy of the decision maker of the executor, but they did not look into the ground situation and do not consult the stakeholder before they issue this thing. And then from what we see that a lot of changes happen during this hour is actually the supply chain pressure. If there is no supply chain pressure from UK, from EC, and from other part of the world, I do not think there will be such a reformation or certain drastic action taken against the what we call illicit employer who try to exploit the worker. Because in the sense that Malaysian employer always think that migrant worker come here to work, they want money, they want to work extra, but they also forgot that the migrant worker is actually human being. They deserve a break. I mean, money itself is one thing, but their health condition is also another thing. And if you really check through the situation of the housing, it sounds very, very interesting. But if you check with the Malaysia Federation of Employer, Datuk Samsudin, he will tell you that they are not ready. So when you have a law which is not ready to be enforced, it just remain as a piece of paper there. And then recently there was actually about the social security going to include the domestic worker, which is another question. If you look at the title of the Social Security Act for the worker, which means worker, but domestic worker is not considered as worker. They are considered as helper. Are they able to actually to be included into the Social Security Act? This is another question about the legislative loophole that we need to look into. And then recalibration, we see that it's very interesting to see that Malaysia has took such a big effort to actually to introduce the recalibration process. If you look into the outcome, at this moment, probably around 150,000 participated, out of which half of them, at least close to about 75,000 actually choose to return home, and about 73,000 plus, close to 74,000 look for the recalibration. If you look at the structure of recalibration, it is actually meant for the big corporation, big company, big plantation company, big manufacturing company. So the government is actually looking into the welfare of the big corporation who actually make a lot of profit, and many of them are still enjoying the what we call some sort of concession. Yeah? Like for example, the law enforcement to them is actually very minimal and all this sort of thing. If we, in actual fact, if we really study the economic structure of Malaysia, more than 90%, I would say 92% of the employer of the migrant, they are actually from the small, medium enterprise, which is actually probably this actually deserve a second look by the academician, that big corporation, they may be hire a lot of people, but the real contribution to the economic sector is actually SME, which is very important. In this particular matter, if you look into the recalibration program, how many is applied to the SME and the small mom-and-pop businesses? So this actually like the government has overlooked the need of the economic sector that we are actually encountering with, because these are the people who actually really contribute to the multiplier effect in our economic system. The big corporation is only counting on the export. Yeah. Next. Yeah. So what are the role of the NGO? So we do not try to overplay the role of the government. We are only the bridging instrument of the policy. The policy says something which cannot be implemented. The diplomatic, what we call community, cannot interfere because they are restricted by the diplomatic protocol to reach out to the irregular people. That is actually where our role come in as in between, because of the what we call embassy cannot help, but we can help our people and then communicate with embassy. So as far as the platform is concerned with the migrant care, we are very focused on care, counseling, advocacy, research, and education. Counseling meaning that we are facing the people who is facing problem, and we try to find a way to at least help them to resolve the problem that face at the contextual level. Advocacy is actually more on the fight for their right of the salary and all this sort of thing. That's why we are always like maybe it's not so friendly to JDK, but we are actually talking about the fact of the reality of the life of the people who actually need money, because that is what they deserve. Yeah. And then research, I think this is the part where we hope that Dr. Nadia and the academic team can actually get more engaged in the evidence-based research that will actually reflect the more contextual fact, which is actually revealing what is happening on the ground, as compared to the policymaker just counting on the big macro, big picture globally. And then the other thing that we do during the COVID situation is actually we provide the material support, because we know that migrant, especially irregular, they have no money, they have no job, they have no food. So our job is actually to make sure that we deliver food to feed their stomach first. And then during that particular process, then we spread the awareness of the situation of COVID, that COVID is dangerous, don't play a fool. And then we also tell them about the social distancing and all these things. So this is actually through the NGO effort. And then of course, where we are reaching out to them, we also actually receive their complaint. What is the problem? That actually where everything come out more and more in-depth situation, where actually, like for example, like they don't have the passport, they come in illegally, their birth certificate, they dead, and all this sort of thing. So this one we have to collaborate with the Malaysian government, Malaysian NGO, as well as the embassy to bridge out the gap that they cannot reach out to. Uh, and then many things that happen, whether it's in Indonesia or in Malaysia, the policymaker actually didn't actually, they only based on the macro sector. There's lack of the meso level or community-based research. Because if you are looking into micro, that is too detailed. If you look at the macro, it's only show you the figure and the pattern, but it doesn't bring the decision maker to the in-depth understanding of what is happening on the ground. That's why in this particular situation, again, I would actually like strongly what we call seeking the what we call whatever funding to support the academician to do more evidence-based research, because this is very important so that we can have a sound and applicable policy and reduce the policy gap. Next. Yeah. So pandemic is actually is a blessing in disguise to us, because in the past Malaysia tried to exclude the what we call the migrant worker, because they do not want too many of them, especially irregular. So with this pandemic itself, we become more inclusive. We can become more inclusive, because pandemic tidak kena bulu, ya, they will attack anybody. So that actually will bring us to the awareness of the humanity, of the common threat on the public health. For example, the Housing Accommodation Act is one of them, and then the decent work as awareness is also part of them. That actually has also being the wake up call to the policymaker. And then it also bring together the academician and the CSO, because academician, we need academician to give the what we call expert advice to the government through their expertise, while CSO has the what we call has the primary information that actually can support their research. That actually as far as the what we call this particular webinar itself is a big step for us, that we can actually collaborate and work effectively for the betterment of our country and our society. And then in this particular situation is showing the emergence of the CSO role in supporting the government policy, where actually government cannot reach out to regular, like police cannot go in, immigration cannot go in because they are scared. But CSO go there, they have no pressure. They are more open. They are more acceptable to us, because they are so afraid of police and immigration. But when we go in, these people, they are good people who come to help us. And then we can also see the what we call, probably this can be interested to Nadia, with regard to the e-commerce, because this is actually the trend that we can see, that even though many shopping malls closed down, but Lazada is doing a very good business. The logistic company is doing good business. That is actually emergence of this e-commerce, where actually whether in Malaysia or Indonesia, we have been working very hard on actually empowering this particular entrepreneurial development, that actually the people from the rural area, as long as you have internet connection, you have good product, you can do your business from home. Yeah, rather than has to depend on big corporation to market you through the supply chain. And then the pandemic also actually bring the solidarity among the CSO all over the world, because we face a similar problem, and then we try to find solution. So this is actually is a good concrete development. And then as far as this part is concerned, it also bring to the awareness of the role of the CSO. For example, the application of the good recruitment practice forum, and then the zero cost movement, and so on and so forth. This actually will bring to the awareness to the corporate sector that their job is not just to make money, but they also have the social responsibility to their migrant worker. Next. So the impact on the receiving country. So we see more human trafficking as a result of the introduction of mid-online system. As what if those who are in Malaysia, probably they can see what Dato' Ayub Khan has done in stopping this human trafficking at the Johor border. It is actually like it was actually undiscovered. It was actually out of our notice. But when Dato' Ayub is there, he has done a great job in at least slowing down or stopping. And then we can also see that from what happened to the industry itself, Malaysia plantation is actually losing 10 billion ringgit last year because lack of the harvester. So this will actually bring a wake-up call to the big boss that they need this worker to harvest their fruit so that they can make money. And we can see that the glove industry is needing about 40,000 people. And then domestic worker, as mentioned by Pusma, you need about 10,000, which I believe is certainly at least 6 to 7 times more. Yeah? Where at least we can see because of the economic structure of Malaysia and the more educated women participate in the workforce and the economic sector, we need more domestic worker or a caretaker to ensure that our women in Malaysia is actually free to pursue for their ideal and their career. So we cannot overlook the importance of the domestic worker here. And of course, there are a lot of new things coming out in terms of the international labor standard compliances, which actually will require the government or to do something, or else they will face a sanction in the importing country. As what we can see, for example, the glove is actually been sanctioned in US, EC, and UK, and what we call traditional palm oil facing the sanction by the US government and EC. Yeah. And Sri Lanka, even though not so big, they totally sanction the importation of palm oil because there are certain issue on the abuse issue. So so from what we can see is actually why the government recalibration is actually facing the lukewarm acceptance by the migrant, because there are lack of confidence that they are safe, as what we mentioned. Yeah. So this is the part there actually where CSO should play their role. Then I already mentioned about the booming of the e-commerce platform. Next. Yeah. So a private agency challenge, because in Malaysia, when talk about private agency, we refer to those recruitment agent, zero cost recruitment. The question is actually the government can come up with a policy in Indonesia saying that was zero cost recruitment, but the question is who is going to pay for that? Yeah. Probably the employer will pay, later on deduct, and then in response to that, there becomes zero intake. So the labor intensive industry will be faced the problem. So the abolishment of Protocol 2011, this is actually is a deadly policy that is actually creating so much trouble, which actually we recommend to Indonesia not to engage with JDK at all when discussing about the maid placement, because they don't want to play any they don't want any responsibility, so they shouldn't be given the authority to sign the MOU or to present in an MOU. As what we can see is actually like, even though what has been mentioned that JTK has been helping a lot of this, but we can see that JTK office, either in Putrajaya or in Selangor, they are actually not doing as what Ms. Haryanti is mentioning. So they are actually playing the role of immigration, because to us it's actually when a migrant violate the immigration law, let immigration enforcement law take effect. And then as a JTK, they should conduct their due diligence duty to ensure that worker get their pay, not to ignore just because they are irregular. And then if they are irregular, let them go back. It was under the immigration law. But what they work for, that is their sweat and blood, they must be paid. Yeah. And then there is also like there's lack of pre-arrival and post-arrival training, meaning that the training itself in Indonesia before pre-arrival is just a piece of paper showing that they attend 10 hours, which is conducted by agent. But upon the arriving, they still know nothing because this is the paper signed by the agent. Post-arrival is very important. Before they've been placed out to the employer, it is very important that that is the last line of defense to ensure that our migrant know where to seek help, what are their rights, and all this sort of thing. And the agency as abuse is not just what we call is actually withholding of passport, and then holding their salary payment and not giving the pay slip, and they don't even know how much is the deduction. Next. Nadia, you have to cut me off. Yeah, once it's already over. My time is already over. So
around 5 minutes more, Mr.
Okay.
Alex.
Okay. As far as the dilemma faced by an employer, it's actually like SME. They are actually the powerhouse of our economy, yet ignored by the JTK policymaker. And then the constraint of the new recruitment because of the MOU situation, because of the COVID situation, that employer is facing labor shortage. And then migrant abscondment, they run away due to they feel that because they cannot find any solution that can solve their problem, the only way to escape from the cruelty and the abuses and exploitation is running away. And that actually has become big issue to us. As we can see around us, there are more and more irregular migrants which are supposed to stay at the employment place and the hostel that is provided to them. And then there's also, like we have mentioned a lot about SDG, Sustainable Development Goals 2030. A lot of things which has been discussed, have been mentioned, is always on the paper. What has been done on the ground? So this is another question that we have to think critically and approach it in the most constructive way of finding the solution, but not finding the fault. Yeah. And then the corruption in the and law enforcement. This is the part that at least is including the what we call the selective prosecution, meaning that if you look into the anti-human trafficking, what we call enforcement wise, there are so many rate. More than in 2019, there are more than 200 rape and less than 8 cases being prosecuted. That show what there's something wrong somewhere, whether it's a policy gap or is it because corruption or collusion. This is something which is actually very urgent to look into. And of course, which has been addressed is actually housing and accommodation in facing a pandemic next. Yeah. So as far as the challenge issue is a pandemic itself, trafficking, employment, the area I like to actually bring out, highlight here is actually wage theft. During pandemic, employer always take the advantage of salary cut. When you want to cut the salary, so they just ask the employee or migrant worker just to sign a paper that they agree. So this is something which is actually not right. If they want to do anything, to change anything, they must get the authentication from the embassy to authenticate that both agree, not just based on the just sign one paper and then JTK accept it as such. Yeah. So wage theft has been very rampant among the cleaning services. First is actually the cleaner came in on the less than 3 days, they've been placed out as domestic worker. They are forced, they have become the forced labor to work in the sector which they are not willing to work. And then if they don't work, they are facing the debt bondage and the threat. Yeah, this is very challenging. And all their salary, because they are under the employment of cleaning services, the end user employer only pay their salary to to the uh, to the cleaning service company, not to them. So they have no right to see their salary at all. The only thing they can do is borrow. Why should they borrow their own income from the cleaning services? And this particular matter has been overlooked by JDK. And if you look at the cleaning services, majority of the cleaners, they have to work at least 4 to 5 houses places per day, and each session will take them about 3 hours. And on average, they are working 12 to 15 hours a day. Where do they have the time to go lodge the report? And how can they find a way to JTK Selangor to file the report? So it will need the initiative. And then when the immigration conducted the rescue operation, they will put into the shelter. There's no action from JTK because to JTK, those who actually been rescued by the operation, they are all illegal. So this is something very wrong about the perspective of JTK officer. So the shelter, we have the facing the problem of the shelter of the male worker. So we have a few female shelter, but what about right recently in Wang Samaju, there was a case of Pakistani never paid, never received the salary until committed suicide. Then this particular matter, if he faced the problem, who can solve that? If they actually reported, there's no place for them. The only place for them is actually immigration detention center because the employer will actually terminate their work permit. They are supposed to leave within 14 days. They cannot seek justice because even before the court case filed, they already in the position of irregular migrant. So this will be actually very challenging gap that we have to come out with. And then uh, of course, because to me it's actually these are actually a very comprehensive situation that we have to face, but we cannot actually resolve it overnight. As what Haryanti said, that we have to actually collaborate and then discuss it heart to heart and really have the strong political view to resolve the problem. Next. Yeah. So this is actually already been mentioned. The intersectionality is about the discrimination, yeah? That the exclusions policy, for example, cannot get married, cannot get what we call public health care, and then cannot give birth to the baby, so on and so forth. Next. Yeah. So the challenge ahead is actually like the immediate assistance is needed is actually, for example, Haryanti was mentioning about the recalibrations, repatriation. Why make it so difficult? If they want to go back, they what is happening? Probably we can actually look into the practice in Australia, Korea, and UK. I'm illegal migrant. I want to go back. I have no money, so the government will assist them to get a job, to buy the ticket, and then go home. Not through all the process, which is actually making them even more fearful to report themselves to go back to the home country. And then there's always lack of data about irregular migrant. We want to help them. How many of them? Where are they? So this actually need a very hard work among the NGO, the researcher, as well as the government, that we have to compile it with the aim of at least solving the problem, but not to at least creating any harassment. So and if in fact in Putrajaya we also have the MAPO, which is actually anti-trafficking unit. But apparently that there are so many agencies involved, but they are not communicating with each other, because each agency have their key performance index to achieve. So they are more in looking into how many prosecution rather than how to solve a problem, because they are law enforcement. And then the other part is actually this is very important. When we migrate, like Indonesia, they have one door system controlled by BPMI or BNP 2 that actually require all domestic workers has to get out from there, has to register, follow through the procedure. But the procedure take time, and it's actually very agency friendly until it create the debt bondage that this type of policy, I call it as a structural violence, because you create this policy is actually to open up the exploitation and create the victims. So arbitrarily, we have seen that actually many of the victims who actually fall victim to the forced labor, once they got into the case, and many cases were actually identified as gray area, all these victims be put into the detention center and then to be deported. And then there's no what we call access to justice in that. So many of the cases actually not being informed to the embassy itself, and there's no discussion between embassy and the immigration and the JDK on how to resolve the problem and to seek truth. So this is another challenging on the ground situation. Next. Yeah, so this is another thing. And then the contractual default, probably in Indonesia, that we have so many things that because they don't want to come here. So a lot of promises, a lot of what we call Malaysia ini bumi hujan emas, yeah, until they are actually being deceived and convinced to come over. But when they came here, they face the problem. Next. So this is a better normal. Next. So concern of the sending country. Most of the sending country, most important thing, agenda in their negotiation is at least safe migration. Yeah. And then we have to recognize that there is a feminization, informalization, and a shift of the migration pattern. Yeah. And then Malaysia is facing the problem because of their declining integrity, because too many prosecution. There are so many what we call policy gap, which actually we need to improve on. Next. Yeah. So this is actually what been mentioned by Puan. Next. Yeah, emerging trend is actually like what we call the human trafficking. And then right now we have the genetically transformed agriculture product. Now we have a transformed outsourcing activity which has been banned since 2018. So right now, the cleaning services is becoming the outsourcing company that sell domestic worker and sell their cleaning service worker to other company, including the factory and so on. So basically, this is and then next. Yeah. So basically, all these things I think is actually very much self-explanatory. And then next. Yeah. So when looking forward, we also have to be prepared for the post-pandemic recruitment, placement agency, and all this sort of thing. What happened during pandemic situation is just an indication of what's happening. What had really happened cannot be unhappened, but we should have some mitigation plan of how to overcome the abuses during this period. And then the law enforcement itself, let's say, for example, for the immigration, they receive more than 4 billion ringgit a year from the levy. However, only less than 900 million been given back to the immigration to do their job. And majority of the money go to the privatized agency who do the data processing for them. Just imagine how immigration can run with such a minimum budget. Even their truck is not running well. Their computer system is not working. Yeah. And then we also Malaysia also have to look into what we call the out migration of our people. If we look properly, that Australia, New Zealand has been the receiving country of many of our irregular migrants. This is actually the trend. If you look into the more than 200,000 unemployed graduate, this is the area that JTK also have to address, not only looking at the migrant from Indonesia, Bangladesh. We also have to prepare ourselves to check on what is happening to our young people who actually moving out. And then finally, essentially, we cannot deny the fact of the Industrial Revolution 4.0 that actually will decentralize the production system. Perhaps this could be another model that we can collaborate with the sending country in the labor-intensive and technological-based production line. Next. Thank you. Oh, so basically, if you want to check, I have some figure over in the appendix. Next. So this is this particular table is actually from the immigration office that indicate where are the migrant worker. So you can see that Selangor is the biggest, and then followed by Johor and so on and so forth. With this, then we are able to do the what we call the assumption of the tracking where are all these migrant workers are. Next. And then if you look at the trend of the migration from Indonesia for PMP TKI, we can see that what we call the increasing trend of going to Taiwan, Hong Kong. For Malaysia, is actually going down and down and down. Yeah. Next. And as far as the migration trend is concerned, we can see that the formal and informal breakdown. So in the past, informal is about, in 2014, informal is only 42%. But when you come into 2019, Indonesians send more 51.55% of the worker as an informal worker abroad. And if you look into the next table here on the, I cannot hear, you can see that the feminization, because if you look at the what we call the trend of the female migration, in 2018 is 70%. So the female is actually become very dominant contributor to the remittance of the country. Next. Yeah. So this at least show the migrant stock in ASEAN. As what we can see, we are not the biggest recipient. I think the biggest is actually Thailand. Thailand have at least 3.63 million migrant. Malaysia, we have 3.43, including the irregular. And the next one is actually Singapore, I think number 3, about 2.something million, 2.1 million. So this particular trend itself showing that we must also focus on these 3 countries in having the what we call the reformation take place, so that it can become the momentum for the rest of the ASEAN. Next, I think that's all. Oh, so basically, this is actually the evidence-based what we call a model which I created. That when we do the study, the content must be very very clear. It must have a very strong context at the field, and they must be interconnected so that we can actually come to the finding on the irregular migration. Thank you. That's all. Any more? No more. So this is wage theft. So those who are interested to study about the wage theft, these are the indicator probably you can use for you to do the categorization in your whether empirical or the qualitative approach. Next. Forced labor. This is you can find in the ILO. Next. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sorry to take so much out of your time.
I always don't want to interrupt Mr. Alex because he has so many interesting information to share. Thank you so much, Mr. Alex. As I always stress to my class that migrants are also human beings. They are also have needs and concerns that we need to cater. Not just workers. They don't come here just to work. They are human beings. They need they have concerns and so on. Okay, thank you very much. I shall move to the next speaker, which is Professor Dr. Marwati Riza. Okay, I think Mr. Riyad, you will be sharing. I already made you co-host. You'll be sharing Prof slides.
Sure thing.
All right.
Okay. Let me just wait
Okay,
a
thank you, Mr. Riyad.
moment.
Open all to you, Prof.
Very much.
Thanks to moderator Nadia who has given me time to present. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Before that,
Okay. Thanks to moderator Nadia who has given me time to present, and the honorable panelists Nur Haryanti Nur, Sidik Ministry, Human Resources, Malaysia, and Alex On from Migrant Care, and from UKM, associates from Dr. Sulawati Maid Bashir. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good day. Okay. Sorry. The first time I would like to introduce our research team from Law Faculty Hasanuddin University, Professor Sabsum Bahri, Dr. Maskun, and Dr. In Kakarita, and then Mr. Riyad Anwar, and then Mr. Parhi Paki, and me myself as a leader in the research team. Let me start my presentation. It is Indonesian perspective on international migrant management during COVID-19. The overview. Travel restrictions imposed by governments around the world have resulted in reduction of global remittance by 20% in 2020. This loss is largely explained by migrant workers who experience limited mobility and significant fall in wage. At macro level, middle to low income countries such as Indonesia were protected in 2020 to load at least 19.7 equivalent for $145 billion US, its national income. In year 2013, Indonesia managed to collect over $11.5 billion USA by year 2020. This number were estimated by World Bank to reduce up to 1.5 or 13% loss from last year incoming remittance. The COVID uncertainty to Indonesian migrant workers, novel problems and same old problems. The first, hal in migrant mobility, which travel restriction imposed migrant flows most likely impeded, be it for international and internal migrant workers. Indonesia, like other countries, which predominantly send their workers abroad, experience significant reduction and its yearly placement, which merely 887 worker placement in January 2021. As reference, BP2ME reported 2019 placement is 23,611 migrant workers, followed by in year 2020 with 811 migrant workers. The next suspensions from seven countries, potential transmission of COVID-19 infected migrant workers to their destination countries makes a valid case from countries to unilaterally limit the mobility of Indonesian migrant workers. Indeed, this comes at cost uncertainty in the Sidon, with destination being the most feasible one to the said Indonesian workers. And also extra costs on explaining to adjust to health protocols set by receiving countries. Taiwan in December 2011 to 2016 temporarily suspend entry of Indonesian migrant workers for indefinite time. From 1st to 15 December, 32 or 40 positive cases came from Indonesian workers, which 80% of total case. According to BP2ME annual report, this year also makes the record of zero placement of Indonesian workers into its Asian neighboring countries, Malaysia and Brunei Darussalam. Compare this last year, where Malaysia was one of the top receiving countries for Indonesian workers, which approximately 40,633 individual by year 2020. And we talk about that. We talk about that low placement but considerable waves of repatriation. In Indonesian case, the national government had fled its migrant workers to remain at their destination country. Indonesian migrant workers insist to return back to Indonesia, either voluntarily due to economic decline in the receiving country or due to forced repatriation by the receiving country. Accordingly, from the International Organization of Migrant, IAMS, report on December 20, 2020, we learned that approximately 122 Indonesian migrant workers were repatriated to Indonesia. Yet this number remains suspect. It did not incorporate those who return to unofficial channels. And then from the aspect stranded and vulnerable. Why is it true that the ratio of placement and repatriation was simply learned towards the water? The presence of migrant workers abroad remains considerably high, especially those who enable voluntary return to Indonesia due travel bans. These workers have to undergo lockdowns in labor camps and dormitory with increased risk of contagion among their peers. In joint survey of 149 migrant workers working in Saudi Arabia and Malaysia conducted by representative of Indonesian Migrant Worker Union in the representative nation, it is revealed that there are reluctant to report their health condition due to fear the local authorities. job security of Indonesian migrant workers, especially the low-skilled workers, has been a recurring issue for Indonesian prior to COVID-19 outbreak. The pandemics merely amplify fragility in their current job security. And then Indonesian migrant workers should be constantly cautious with the possibility of being suddenly laid or from work without severance. For those paid lays off due to COVID-19 situation, some countries such as Japan offer social security schemes to cover these overseas workers. The issue being that handful of Indonesian migrant workers are locally knowledgeable enough to access this information. This might be due to language barrier and limited access to government-related information. And then Indonesia doesn't have contact point or diplomatic attached to disseminate this exclusive information. Another possibility is for them to retain the work but at risk of underpaid or not paid at all. Ladies and gentlemen, now we're talking about relevant regulatory in Indonesian. Relevant regulatory frameworks. The Constitution of Indonesia warrants its people the right of works and legal protection. The Constitution also warrants under Article 28 see that anyone entitled for social security, and the other law number 18 of 2017 concerning placement and protection of Indonesian migrant workers abroad opens general framework to the protection of Indonesian migrant workers abroad. It emphasizes three key points. The first point is outline the protective guidelines starting from the placement of the workers, the destination country, and up to repatriation, the worker back to Indonesia. It provides social security schemes for the workers from pre-departs, departs, and repatriation periods under auspice in the Indonesian implementing body of social security. We call the BPJS. BPJS thus can be further observed in law number 40 of 2014. Clarifies the role government bodies, central government roles in authorized licensing to Indonesian Migrant Placement Agency, we call the P3MI. The issue being the central government is limited its ability to supervise the qualified performance of migrant placement agency regionally. Under this law, regional governments, instead of private companies, oversee the proposition of the pre-depart vocational training and placement of workers. This is positive change because the regional government is better equipped locally to arrange educational training. It is local migrant workers. And then the circular number 14 of year 2020 by the head of Indonesian Migrant Worker Protection Agency concern implementing guidelines on Indonesian migrant worker placement during the adaptation period, a new normal. The highlight of circulation is as follows. The first one should be authorized for deployment the Indonesian migrant workers in questioning to people to health tests decided by the receiving country and also obtain recommendation by Indonesia consulate representative or by representative of Indonesian Economic Trade Office. Administratively, for placement, workers ought to hold working visa on their destination countries and also be registered by information system who decide to protect the worker. And law, law number 11 of 2021, we say the omnibus law concerning job regulation is the latest and perhaps one of the most contentious laws in Indonesian labor regime. It amends the law number 24 of year 2011, therefore exploring the prerequisite for the social security scheme. And then the law offers no novel solution to the current waves to repatriate workers. This late law still require migrant workers to obtain social insurance schemes to be eligible for severity benefits. The most stable benefits employed migrant workers could really, on for the time being, the social security for COVID-related lays off. Government regulation number 59 on 2021 concerning the implementation of protection towards Indonesian migrant workers. This regulation is the follow-up to law number 18 of 2015. The regulation is questioned did the change upon duty for migrant placement agency to establish office in the country in which it employs its workers. This is a positive change because it enables workers to communicate directly its labor dispute to the placement agency and government action abroad. Campaign of the self-reporting of overseas Indonesian, including those working abroad as migrant workers, encouraged to make the best use the mystery of embrace self-reporting. We can say peduli WNI whenever they find themselves in distress or precarious situation. Another media complaint outlet is Drog Indonesian Migrant Worker Crisis Center. And then social security during COVID-19. Government through BPJS 6, they ensure that social security could be accessible to its migrant worker. For starter, there are 122 branch office and 203 pioneering office spread throughout Indonesia to help the migrant to arrange its social security schemes pre-department. The agency also ensured that benefits would be accessible even abroad by establishing was networking with banking on both domestic and international scale. One of the most recent development introduced by BPJS to provide ease management to payroll for the migrant worker is through the intermediary program distributor of Indonesian social security. This is a community effort to assign certain trustworthy individual to manage the payroll of migrant workers working in certain region or community, be it national, international level. For health checkups, the agency also holds cooperative networking with hospital and health facilities and 2,055 units for facilitation service pre or the post-depart. Unfortunately, currently, there is no means to extend this network receiving countries. Another more short-term solution in Indonesian mission to distribute food package to 50,000 foreignable Indonesian in Malaysia. JSO remains from a policy advocacy informal reporting NGO. We can call IAMS in Indonesia, had a long interactive history with Indonesian Protective Migrant Agency, B2PMI. In October 2020, IAM coordinates with the agency to hold national level consultation with regards to the plan to abolish recruitment fees Indonesian migrant worker. The consultation as follow-ups the agency regulation number 9 of 2020 with the same topic. One of the important outcomes from consultation was the scope recruitment fee that could be abolished for the migrant worker. Perhaps what is interesting, the JSO ability develop novel estimation of irregular migrant flows called IAMS. Displacement tracking metrics which visualize undocumented worker based on its population movement. Takeaways. Economic crisis caused by COVID-19 could implicate longer, deeper, and serious impact on Indonesian migrant workers, be it their income, health, social security, on their contribution remittance to Indonesian GDP. The uncertain faced by Indonesian migrant workers' job security is not novel condition due to COVID-19. It has been ongoing issue in the file and reflects poor legal protection provided by agreement between workers and deployment agency. And the third tripartite interaction between migrant workers, deployment agency, and government still has more room to improvise. The parties yet to see cohesiveness, especially when dealing with labor dispute. Perhaps this is because law number 18 of year 2016 had yet to clarify this in role of the stakeholder from its right, duties, and role in the tripartite interaction. This can be done through specialist measures provided by the agency. And the last, government move to digitalize its migrant has slowly shown its positive output. Self-reporting has allowed us to get a more complaint response. Finally, my present. Thanks. This is my team. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Marwati. A very insightful. We actually get information from Indonesia's part. Very interesting. We know how Malaysia and Indonesia is mostly related to migrant workers. We deal with migrant workers, but perhaps in a different trajectories. But in Indonesia might be a sending country, and Malaysia most probably to the receiving country. So, but both of the states are handling migrants. So I think it's very important to get insight from both parties. All right. Before I start with Dr. Salawati, just a reminder for all the participants, if you have any questions, you can start posting in the chat box so that after Dr. Salawati's presentation, we can just proceed to the question and answer session. Okay, and the slides are also being shared in the chat box. Thank you, Prof. Marwati. Okay, next, last but not least, I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Salawati Matbasir from UKM to give her insight. I believe Dr. Salawati, she doesn't have any slides to share. She will just give her thoughts online, but I mean vocally without any slides. Okay, yes, please, Dr. Salawati, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nadia, and very happy to see a very, I can say, progressive presentation by three panelists before. I don't have slide. I just want to give my opinion because I think many of what I want to say is already covered by Mr. Alex, by Dr. Marwati, and also from Puan Haryanti. Okay, I just want to bring the attention all about why we have to protect this migrant workforce. Why? Because we listen to all these things, but why we need to? First of all, because our economic actually stake are high. Yeah, and for decades, these workers, they have supported our local businesses by filling all the labor, domestic labor shortages. In Malaysia, we don't want to do many works. We very depending on migrant workers, and you can see that among over 10 million migrant workers around ASEAN, 7 million is actually intra-ASEAN. So that's why we can see from Cambodia, from Vietnam, from Indonesia, from Thailand, from Philippines come to Malaysia. So we cannot deny their contribution to our economics. And foreign workers, for me, whether they are illegal or legal, because the illegal one, we don't know the numbers, the exact numbers, but they are still contribute. This is what Mr. Alex said just now, because why we need to look into these things also, because foreign workers will remain critical to Malaysia's effort to start the economic even after this post-pandemic, because without these workers, many of our small and medium-sized enterprises may face closures. Yeah, and we also see that every 10 new migrant workers help create another 5 new jobs for Malaysians. So this is something that this is the increase to our GDP. That's the first one. Second, Malaysia will look to regain its competitive edge in the unsettled international markets once this economic fully reopens. We are struggling, yes, but we cannot deny the contribution of these workers. And I think disruption to global supply chain may present opportunities for Malaysia to venture in new industries for post-COVID-19. So to continue of this access to this economy, we need also our whether skilled or unskilled migrant workers very critical in this regard. So I do believe no matter what we are trying to tell, we need them and we have to protect them. I think in part of the government of Malaysia and also the NGOs, of course, there is always a different opinion because we are looking in a different path, but still, we will come to the conclusion what we can do the best for these people. And I think thirdly, the border control are essential to the most countries for COVID-19 response. And I think while migrant workers are actually important to Malaysian economy, but they are also capable of entering and crossing borders illegally for jobs. That is dangerous. I think especially in Kalimantan area, when they got the Jalan Tikus to come across from Kalimantan to Sabah and Sarawak. And even Sabah to Sarawak also. That's how COVID, can be spread. Because I can tell you, people might thinking very easy, say that why don't we have more militaries or armed forces there? But if they know how big is that borders, then they will start to understand the situation. Yeah, and I think to understand the situation, to be fair to everyone, the economics, the human being, the rights, I think the full and fair access to the healthcare and also the COVID-19 testing facilities in the country of origin within ASEAN is very important. I think now with the vaccination program is start already in many countries, we should take this opportunity to ensure that our foreign workers also get part of it. I think Singapore is the country that give free the vaccination to the foreign workers, because if we are talking about we don't put them as same part as our people, then they are in our community, in our society. You can see them in supermarket. So if you say that I'm being vaccinated but they are not, so you think you are being safe. You are not being safe. So that's why for me, we have to, we have to look at it. Actually, one thing before I think to wrap up this thing is to say that without foreign workers, Malaysia and Singapore will struggle to bounce back. We can't say that we can have it. We really need them. And I think that the problem that COVID-19 has exposed actually is the risk that these foreign workers living. I think Mr. Alex already said about it, the working conditions, the living conditions. Yeah, because normally their employer try to make money as much as they can from these foreign workers, put them in the very, I can say, small areas, small house that can be put 20 people, you know, and even if they are in construction site, they don't have any house. They are staying near the construction site with their own build their area. And I can still remember during the COVID, the first lockdown back in March to 2020, we can see that how many of the irresponsible employers, especially from construction sites and also tourism industries, neglect their foreign workers just like that. And they are really starving, they don't get their salary, and their boss just disappeared like that, and you take care of yourself. And I still remember that how many NGOs in Malaysia, even the Indonesian Student Association in UKM, they go to reach their Indonesian people at the construction site near Bangi, just to help them what they can do. And also there's a few rich Indonesian people who are stay in Malaysia. They post in Instagram and also Facebook that tell us where the others Indonesian who needs help, we will come and send. Either they go up to Seremban, they go to Malacca, all this. Why? Because of lack. Because our law never thought that it can be happen like this. Our employers in all industries never prepared themselves for anything like this. So when this thing like this happen, they are clean their hand and say, okay, that's your problem. So I think this is the vulnerable of the employment population, especially from these foreign workers. So I think what we have to do is we have to see that the unequal policy provision across the region need to be taken care of our leaders, because the promise of universal care in one country is not necessary if the other country are lack of it. I think we have to look how the other ASEAN country works together. At the end of it, people will say, is the political will. Yes, but if no one shout to the leaders, then the leaders would not realize it. I love the word shout, because if you are just simply nicely to these political people, they are talking about their political things. They want to maintain the power. But we are talking about the human being that progress for the economy and also their rights. And I do believe that we in this kind of situation, we need to help each other, and we need to have the empathy to other human beings. So with this, I think I conclude my my ideas and my opinion, because I think all the panelists already talk all this concept and the idea. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Salawati. Perks of being the last speaker. Everything has been covered from the previous speaker. But I actually love some points that I would like to highlight with Dr. Salawati actually mentioned. The nexus, I mean, all the speakers actually mentioned it also, the nexus between development and migration. I think that cannot be denied. The contribution of migrant workers is actually there. It's actually very obvious. But perhaps some people would like to turn a blind eye towards it, making it very difficult for them. And of course, the situation now that we are facing with COVID-19 is actually unprecedented. We don't really expect this to happen, so everyone is actually, you know, trying their best to provide all their all the will that they can to actually give the best to this very vulnerable group of people. Thank you very much, Dr. Salawati. All right, I would like to move to the next session because we have such little time, we have to just proceed. Okay, I will just read one. There are two questions in the chat box. If you have any questions after that, you can just you can just type it out in the chat box, and I will read it out. All right, the first question is for Puan Nurhayanti and Mr. Alex, both of them, because it's Nurhayanti and Alex. The question is, the exodus of return of migrant workers will continue to occur in response to the situation of employment continuity in the placement country during and after the pandemic. What should we do for both countries, Indonesia and Malaysia? All right. May I invite Puan Yanti first to give her feedback, and Mr. Alex, you can go after that.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the question. And as I have mentioned in my talk just now, the number of migrant workers will likely decrease and remain stagnant due to the moratorium imposed until at least June this year. But then again, looking at the trend and demand from sectors which are highly dependent on migrant workers, we expect for the number to be increased. And in fact, all the businesses and industries have started to come forward and say they need migrant workers due to this kind of jobs are not really appealing to local workers. So we expect some increase after the moratorium has imposed. But then again, this increase would not be more than the cap, the ceiling that we have put for migrant workers at 15% of the total workforce. Thank you. That's all from me. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Puan Hayanti. Yes, Mr. Alex, you can continue. You need to unmute, Mr. Alex.
Okay, I do agree with Puan Haryanti on the matter because looking at the current economic development situation that we will need actually what we call Malaysia is actually facing some sort of slowing down in our economic activity. However, there are many what we call health-related industry which is actually expanding, and food-related industry, plantation, they are expanding. And now, if we look into the whole situation, is actually are we going to let the what we call the expired policy to continue? Are we going to what we call create the new paradigm in terms of our policy to overcome the policy gaps? So this exactly remain in our bureaucrats what we call table, which they have to decide rationally and involve with the stakeholder, especially with the sending country itself, with the CSO, and also with the uh, with the industry. Because currently, if we look into the interaction between the policymaker with the industry, it's only confined to the big corporation. SME, which is actually the backbone of our economy, need to be addressed. They may not qualify the what we call the criteria of the JTK or Immigration Malaysia, but they are the real people who need the real people. They to actually to produce in our economy and to create the multiplier effect in our economy itself. So it is time for our policymaker to be landed on the reality ground, not just on the computer cyberspace. Yeah. So it is there are so many situations where actually being an independent committee member on the migrant worker management in the MOHR, I realized that there are so many things that become politically sensitive and bureaucratically sensitive when it comes to the implementation. So we do propose certain idea of the something like the e-government solution for the for the recruitment and so on and so forth. However, there was no positive feedback nor negative feedback on the matter. So so it is actually very important that the industry player they actually voice out how much is their need, because for every irregular migrant, for them to persist, to survive in whatever situation, it must have the support for the accommodation and the employment here, which is actually covered up by our informal economy. Informal economy I mentioned here is actually those people who are actually hired outside the regulatory framework system, meaning that, for example, those in the restaurant, they cannot get worker, so they hire those irregular migrant. So this I consider as the informal economy in the formal economy sector. I'm not sure whether am I confusing you guys here. So so as long as there's a demand there, there must be at least we must come up with a compromise, not just using the stick to punish these people, but to find out the solution. How can we create a soft landing for this what we call SME, small industry, which accommodate majority of the migrant. As far as the how many people are there, it is actually a big question mark because none of these irregular migrant is registered. So the best way to approach to this is not to set the target of 15%, but we have to also has to be pragmatic and practical to look into what is the actual demand for this migrant worker to work in our economic sector. So the best contributor to this information is actually the informer, economy, employer. If we always have the intention of applying immigration law number 55 and 56 for illegal hiring and illegal harboring, nobody will come out to tell the government I've hired 10 people where I may be facing 10,000 ringgit fine per person that I hire, and I may be facing 50,000 for illegal harboring. So in this particular, what we call consistent pressure from the policy, which is not pragmatic, we must also come up with a solution of how to find way of resolving the problem, regardless of what just now the professor was mentioning, that we need migrant worker. They are not taking away our job. They are complementing the need of our economic system. Why don't we find a solution to resolve this problem? And then, of course, with this particular matter itself, we also have to look into the situation of the stateless people here, that which actually is going to be the next, let's say, is what we call the social reproductions of these what we call migrant worker. That is their children, because when they are born here, they have no identity, they have no nationality, and then they are also invisible in our system itself. Especially when you look into Sabah plantation, we can see that there are more than 25,000 children who are studying in the community learning center, and there are a few 100,000 who are actually born there and then born to be the plantation worker, but they are actually invisible in our official database. So this could be actually another new challenge that we'll be facing, and we just hope that in overcoming this particular situation of whether it's a product of social reproduction of this social class, uh, we must also look into the policy, the structural policy that actually could actually improve the whole situation. Not just like I we have too many. Let's do some rate. That is not the solution. That's why I say is we have to actually we need the expert what we call opinion. We need the expert research to actually conduct with the open heart, so that we are able to find a solution together, but not to find fault of each other.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alex. I hope both of the panelists had answered the question of Dr. Maskun's questions. Okay, all right. So I will move to the next question because we have quite a few questions to cater from Lynn Karita Sakarina. Okay, to Mr. Alex again, what is the migrant care do to help the migrant worker in this long pandemic situation that we have no know when the situation will be end? And the impact goes to most of foreign workers due to their living or even some discrimination treatment to them while they still stay in a country of workplace. Yes, Mr. Alex, you can proceed.
Thank you very much for the question. In fact, this is a big challenge for us. As what I mentioned about the role of NGO here, we are not government of both countries. We are actually playing the role of bridging the government policy and the social responsibility of both countries. So in this particular matter, as what I mentioned, that at this moment we are actually doing the material supply to make sure that our people, those irregular migrants, they don't go hungry, and to tell them about the seriousness about the pandemic situation. Of course, it is very challenging to raise funds. Like for example, under migrant care during the pandemic situation, we are actually has already reached out more than 2,300 people, including 150 what we call female family, which has the children. The number of children we have roughly is around 400, 2 to 300 what we call children that need milk. So in, let's say for example, in our milk aid program, before we always advise them to stay home, stay safe. And then for the milk aid program, we take the advantage of Lazada and the Good Samaritan from our Malaysian community in adopting the milk need for these children, meaning that migrant care, we don't take any money. We provide information that this family has 4 children. They drink lactogen, they drink Dumex, or they drink whatever milk. If you like to sponsor, you can buy from Lazada and send directly to them. In this particular way, we can erase the what we call the suspiciousness of many NGO who take the advantage of profit taking. Yeah, so we also take the advantage of Lazada delivery that actually can avoid the MCO control. That Lazada deliver man will reach out to the home of these people. Yeah, and of course at this moment our focus is only on Indonesian irregular because it is very important. Not we are try to stigmatize or try to exclude other, but the best is actually we have a segmentation that we do what we know best, and perhaps the Filipinas NGO they can do to their community, Bangladeshi can do to their community in this particular way that we can be more focused, and it also enhance our relationship with the irregular migrant to develop trust and to develop the relationship. So it is also good for the researcher who need to actually conduct the research later on that we already built out this foundation, and then we are already able to actually to help them to open up the problem that because as far as those qualitative researcher, they may find it very difficult to find the entry point to reach out to these people to find the truth, because only by knowing the truth itself then we are able to find the real solution of how to do it, as what is happening to the irregular migrant of Indonesia origin. It is an inevitable process because over the generation we have actually we are serumpun, yeah, we are from same origin. We cannot deny that actually, like in fact if you go to East Indonesia, uh, we can find the Kabupaten Melaka. These are actually the Malaysian from Malacca went to the East Indonesia together with the Portuguese, and they speak our Malay language here. So, that show the interconnectivity of the social cultural of the migration between Malaysia and Indonesia. At the same time, that we also have the what we call migrant from East Indonesia. That actually to them is actually coming to Malaysia, just like they migrate to another island, because the concept of those people when face the natural disaster. For example, the cyclone happened in Lembata recently, has caused more than 200 people dead. They need to move. Perhaps our friend in Ujung Pandang may be able to tell us what's happening to the Badai here, that actually many people become homeless. They need to move out to survive. They need to actually find money to support their family who actually all their agriculture produce all flooded, the house all gone. So that actually can create another situation of migration, whether domestically within Indonesia or cross border to Sabah as well as the Kalimantan there. So this is actually a very challenging situation. So as far as policymaker is concerned, please be pragmatic, please be realistic, and then for the academician, let's do together to find out more truth so that we can actually provide the constructive input to the policymaker.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alex. I'll move on to the next question to Dr. Salawati. It is arguably that worker social security is built in protection to foreign workers. Indonesian law obliges foreign workers working at least 6 months to register the worker social security. How Malaysian law protect foreign workers in terms of worker social security? What is your opinion for encouraging ASEAN worker social security? Yes, Dr. Salawati.
Okay, actually, I think Malaysian have a law that to have to protect the foreign social, this normally I think start from FOMEMA, and then if your health is okay, and now the insurance, you have to be protected, yeah. But the problem that we face in Malaysia is again the employers and also the domestic foreign workers, are they being protected? Because they're in the house and we can't go and ambush and check on them, yeah, like Mr. Alex said, the cleaners and all that. And even in my university, we found out that if we because I'm a legal advisor for this university, if we don't raise our voice in terms of please to ensure that all this mostly Indonesian cleaners in university, they must have the social security, because there is one point that I want to raise up is that how their employers cut their salary almost half. Most of them got about 1,000 to 1,200 salary per month. But when during the lockdown, they only got 300 to 400. And they don't have a voice. They cannot say anyone. They cannot tell anyone. So they come to me and say, what can they do? So I said, that can't be like that. So I have to bring up to this Russia meeting, to the university, to saying that we can stop the contractors who doing this to their foreign workers, because these foreign workers is legal. They can't work in university if they're illegal. They are legal. So why treat them like that? That's what I say. I think if you refer back to the MOHR, you know, Malaysian have to protect the foreign workers in terms of social security. But the problem is the lack of knowledge of these foreign workers, and also the neglects by these employers who don't want to do that. Okay, and I think how to encouraging ASEAN workers social security, as I said, the leaders of ASEAN need to stress this thing. You know, not only talking about the COVID and how we combat this, but we are talking about this 10 million or 7 million migrants in all ASEAN countries. If the leaders have one say and then try to, I can tell that, enforce this in a local law, I do believe that is okay, because we can't do anything if the people above doesn't say anything. You know, like me, you know, academician, we can always stress, we can always come up with our research, but what else we can do? I said we have to fight and fight. You know, I think Mr. Alex knows, he's in that field for so long. You know, even from the Ministry of Human Resource, they do their best, because again, we have a policy. So we have to bite that policy. Because I think everybody try to do the best, but of course there is here and there, because we deal with the human being. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Salah. I believe, yes, when we deal with human beings and it's workers some more, so lots of issues will actually come into place. All right, I'll move to the next question for Puan Yati again. Puan Yati, we admit that issue of wages, and now we know the problem in Malaysia is the salary problem. So what is MOHR's action to deal with the salary problem? How to monitor and time-consuming work, especially factories and cleaners.
Hi everyone again. So before I answer the question, is it possible for me to take just a little bit of time to sort of expand on what Prof. Salawati has kindly shared just now in terms of social security? So that's Malaysia as a country, we have ratified this ILO Convention on Equality of Treatment in terms of accident compensation. So just I'm explaining this just so that we understand that we have ratified this convention, I think in way in the 50s, and then throughout the years, the insurance, say for example, accidents happen to migrant workers working in Malaysia, so the insurance would be covered under SOCSO. So until year 1993, we saw that covering those insurance under SOCSO is not really feasible, in the sense that it is difficult for SOCSO to assess the eligibility of the insured persons due to their short tenure in Malaysia, because the license, the PLKS for foreign workers is renewed annually, and the contract is usually 3 years. So based on that, because of the difficulty, we try to, hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, Puan.
Okay, sorry. So based on that, the policy then was reviewed and changed into a specific insurance compensation specifically for migrant workers. But then the government has received sort of an observation from the ILO, saying that what we're doing is not equal. It's not equality of treatment. So now we're back to the insurance coverage under SOCSO, and it is now equal between local workers and foreign workers. And to improve on the difficulty that arises in year 1993, I think SOCSO has reached out to countries of origin to find ways on how to better improve the portability of benefit to those particular countries. So that's just like an expansion of what Prof. Dr. Salawati has kindly shared, and efforts of the government. So as for the question from on wages, so on the issue of wages, again, Malaysia is a party to two ILO convention on related to wages. One is the Convention number 100 on equal remuneration, which provides for it actually the context is much bigger than equal remuneration. It's equal pay for work of equal value. And then we also ratify another convention on minimum wage. So going on the equal remuneration, we have been receiving again observations from the ILO Committee of Experts saying that we don't really have a mechanism to determine the equal pay for work of equal value. But then again, this is difficult not only for Malaysia but a lot of other countries, especially when we talk about informal sectors, when we talk about care workers, which include again the domestic workers aspect. We are now moving from categorizing domestic work as a form of informal sector. Instead, we recognize them as actual work with productive contribution to the economy. Only by recognizing and acknowledging this, we can sort of try to include them in policies and legislations. And we do have this we call National Wage Index, which is it serves as a benchmark for setting the initial pay level for salary adjustment. This index is being used for both workers and employers in terms to determine the initial pay level index. In terms of payment of wages, when it comes specifically to migrant workers, withholding of wages is actually one of the indicators of forced labor, which is the employers who fail or who withhold the wages to be paid to their workers is actually, I mean, it is wrong under the Employment Act, and workers can file grievances. It is being enforced and it will be investigated under the Employment Act. But then again, we also do admit, I mean, with the finite resources that we have, enforcement might be difficult. But so that's why that's a policy on making it compulsory for the employers to bank in the salary due to the workers to their bank accounts. But then again, there's another problem of not all migrant workers would have a bank account, right? So, that's what I mean when I say our policy needs to be flexible. It needs to be dynamic, because we try to do one way, that does not work. We try to improve and try to do it another way. We are in the midst of trying to see whether payment through some sort of e-commerce thing, e-wages, because migrant workers, I mean, even if they don't have bank accounts, sometimes it's due to their irregular status, but they usually have handphones, right? So probably this method of e-wages could be a way forward to try to help and solve the issue of non-payment of wages by the employers. So that's all I have to share for now. Thank you.
Thank you,
May I interrupt here a
yeah,
little bit?
Alex, yes, please.
So a few things that I like to bring to the attention of the JTK here is actually many of those former workers with the permit, they are not even allowed to open the bank account because of the administrative cost is too much, as what Hayanti was mentioning, that it costs too much, and then their salary bank in is too little, and then the bank manager has the first right to refuse the opening of the account. That is actually the loopholes that actually many of the employer do not actually hold their salary. That is actually the reason that that's happening right now. And then as far as the what we call the social security part, we do have the workman compensation, we do have the surgery and hospitalization, and then as far as social security is concerned, I'm very glad that Puan Nohayati mentioned that domestic worker not as a domestic helper, because it is very important that we recognize domestic working people is considered as worker, not as helper. At least they are protected under our Employment Act. Yeah. And then as far as the what we call the minimum wage regime, it doesn't apply to domestic worker. So how can we have the minimum wage regime that pay 1,250 to those former workers below our poverty bar. And then right now, where the what we call JDK is proposing 800 ringgit to pay to our fellow Indonesian domestic worker, or they wouldn't use that particular word, but they use depending on the market force. But for the survival of these people when they come here, we must make sure that they've been treated equally as what we have signed, the being a party of the Convention 100 there. So it is actually equally important on that. And then the other part is actually like Malaysian do allow migrant to work up to 10 years. So in these 10 years of the most productive year of their life, they do not have any pension fund. So it is very important that the ASEAN, they have to come regionally to come up with the regional pension fund for those people who work within the region. Like we have so many people who are actually working here 20 years. And when they go back just as an old man or old lady, and their retirement is not guaranteed, they do not know what to do. They have no income later on. And many of them spend all their money here. And then when they go back, they now need to have to depend on the Indonesia what we call Kementerian Sosial there. So this is actually very challenging. While they have the productive year, there must be certain form of the old age saving for them. Even though it is actually can be quite troublesome in terms of administrative, but it is a must because we are actually try to compensate those people who contribute to our economy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alex, for your added information. Okay, I will move to the last question. We have to stop because of the
Okay.
yes, all right. The last
Okay.
question is for Dr. Salawati and Mr. Alex. Relating to the current condition, example, migrants not getting a decent place to work or even the wage theft phenomenon mentioned earlier by Mr. Alex, what are the plausible acts both countries can do pertaining strengthening supervision function as the preventive measure and curative measures which its access will be much more limited due to COVID-19 situations to ensure the safeness of the migrant workers? Dr. Salawati, you can go first. After that, you can Mr. Alex can continue.
Well, I know that we already passed one of the act that regarding to, I think last September, to ensure that all those foreign workers supposed to get the place, the lodging, the house, which is supposed to be, protected them, and I can say that what is supposed to. But again, I think I recall back, Mr. Alex said just now that not many employees ready to do that. I think I take the one of the factory near my house where the COVID is spreading because when the KKM people, the Minister of Health people went to their house, actually about 20 people in one house. It's a terrace house. It only can be about 10 people, so no social distancing. So this is the issues. Yeah, I think Mr. Alex can give his opinion.
Yes,
Thank you,
please.
Dr. Sawati, and thank you for the question. So with regards to all this matter, right? Actually, first thing first, yeah. Right now, JDK is empowered to exercise the law enforcement onto the irresponsible migrant worker. So as far as this part is concerned, there shouldn't be any problem with JDK. For example, on the cleaner services, based on the database of those migrants who work, they can actually request the employer to produce the information about the payment slip, the pay slip, and then and as well as the working place of these people. For example, currently I'm actually handling one case of a cleaning service company, which has 113 workers under their flagship. However, if we go down to the ground, there are only less than 35 who are working. Where are the rest? They have been sold off as a domestic worker. They've been sold off to other company to work. So this is the part where actually JTK should come in to do the routine check on and interview this worker where they are. Are they actually getting their pay? Are they actually been actually like working according to the contractual situation? And then the other part is actually there should be what we call the authentication of the surat pernyataan, which allowed them to allow the employer to hold their salary. And then in many situations, I have one girl who worked for 40 months, go back home with only 4,000 ringgit. So after the badai, he don't even have the money to repair the roof. So this is actually the critical situation of the abusers. So what have JTK action taken by JTK on this irresponsible migrant employer? So this is actually very challenging, even though the law has given them the what we call the jurisdiction to act upon. But what have they done? Is there anything wrong? Because we do have a comprehensive law here, but when it comes to the enforcement, there's a huge gap there that we need to address. Why no action taken? So this is certainly a very challenging situation for us as NGO, and then for the migrant worker, and also the other who are working back home in Indonesia, or to help them for the reintegration. So the law is there, the rule is there, everything is there. This is all the human factor on the law enforcement. We cannot simply say JTK do not have enough resources. If they do not have enough resources, they must actually bring in more, because if you look at the contribution of the what we call of the 4 billion per year on the levy, government should have enough money to hire more people to ensure a better system is put in place and the law enforcement to become more effective. It is very sad to see that because, like, for example, if you look at the salary of the minister, human resources minister has the 3rd highest salary income. As it is only below the prime minister and the deputy prime minister. So they can get fat salary. Why not hire enough people to do the right job for the right people? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alex. The part of the salary of the ministry got me very, it's very, very funny. I think like almost all of the people is actually arguing, but yeah, it's like very sensitive to actually mention. So I believe that's about it for the questions because we have to end the session because of Jumat. Okay, I would like to just wrap up about this session. I believe it's a very, very, very informative session because we actually have the opportunity to get all sorts of views from all sorts of people who is very responsible for in terms of migration workers. I can't thank you enough before this session this morning, and I hope if we have another session you will actually want to contribute again, okay, because we know that all of the speakers are very well versed on the issue of migration, and I would thank you for all the participants for their questions, very, very good questions, and if we have more time, perhaps we can actually have more interactive session in future. Okay, with this I will end this session. Thank you very much for all your time and attention. Thank you. Assalamualaikum, and thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Nadia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia.
Okay, for
Thank you,
everyone
Nadia.
who
And,
wants to for the recording, you can just
yes.
email me. My email is in my chat box. In the chat box.
Yes.
Thank you,
Yes.
Thank you, Prof. Mawati. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.